Here in this video, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we do have examples of Jesus' parables that are found in other Christian literature. That is, other literature outside of the New Testament, composed by people who are associated with Christianity in the very broad sense. And so, one of the people that we want to look at here is the Gospel of Thomas. So, this is a work that was composed somewhere around the early part of the second century AD. It doesn't look like what many people might think of it as a gospel. It's kind of a collection of tidbits of material from Jesus, not really kind of in a narrative flow as what we would find in the four canonical gospels. But in the parables, in the Gospel of Thomas, in addition to the ones that we know of in the synoptics, such as the net and the sower, the mustard seed, the weeds in the field, story of the rich man, the feast, the vineyard, the pearl, the leaven, the lost sheep, and the hidden treasures. There are also some new ones that are attributed to Jesus. There's one called the Children of the Field, and this is in Gospel of Thomas 21. And it goes like this. Mary said to Jesus, "Whom are your disciples like?" He said, "They are like servants who are entrusted with a field that is not theirs. When the owners of the field arrive, they will say, 'Let us have our field.' But they are naked in their presence, so as to let them have it and thus to give them their field. That is why I say, when the master of the house learns that the thief is about to come, he will be on guard before he comes and will not let him break into his house, his domain, to carry away his possessions. But you be on guard against the world. Gird your loins with great strength, so that the robbers will not find a way to get to you. For the necessities for which you wait with longing will be found. There ought to be a wise person among you. When the fruit was ripe, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand, and he harvested it. Whoever has ears to hear should hear." So, a very interesting one, of course. It's combined with what we know as the parable of the thief at night. So it has sounds like other parables in the canonical Gospels, but this is a unique one to the Gospel of Thomas. Also, we have one known as the parable of the woman and the empty jar. So this is the Gospel of Thomas 97. Jesus says the kingdom of the Father is like a woman who is carrying a jar filled with flour. While she was walking on the way, very distant from home, the handle of the jar broke, and the flour leaked out on the path. But she did not know it, and she had not noticed a problem. When she reached her house, she put the jar down on the floor and found it empty. Now, it's a very curious parable, and just standing by itself, you're trying to imagine, well, what is all this about? What does finding an empty jar have to do with anything that Jesus might want his disciples to know? And then there's the killer. This is Gospel of John 98. Jesus says, the kingdom of the Father is like a person who wanted to kill a powerful person. He drew the sword in his house and stabbed it into the wall to test whether his hand would be strong enough. Then he killed the powerful one. Now, this sounds like a parable that doesn't really seem to fit with, kind of portrait we have of Jesus in the canonical Gospels, this idea of killing the powerful one. However, I mean, we do have Jesus making statements in the Gospels about having a sword, but also, concerns about those who use the sword will die by the sword. So these are just examples of unique parables that one can find that, once again, are attributed to Jesus. So Jesus' parables in the Gospel of Thomas are intentionally cryptic, and it requires the reader to seek its hidden meaning. Another source to be aware of is what's known as the Apocryphon of James. This is another, I believe, second century AD work, and kind of attributed to one of the apostles. So in chapter 8, verses 6 to 7, it refers to 7 parables that we know of. The parable of the shepherd, the parable of the seed, parable of the building, the parable of the lamps of the virgins, the wage of the workers, the silver coins, and the women. So we know these parables in the synoptic gospels. But there are 3 new narratives that are found here. One is the parable of a date palm shoot. And so it goes something like this. Let not the kingdom of heaven wither away, for it is like a date palm shoot, whose fruit poured down around it. It put forth leaves, and when they budded, they caused the productivity of the date palm to dry up. Thus it is also with the fruit which came from the single root. When the fruit was picked, fruits were collected by many harvesters. It would indeed be good, if it were possible, to produce these new plants now, for then you would find the kingdom. So again, kind of like in the Gospel of Thomas, it is a parable that left by itself, you're trying to make sense of what are you talking about here? In what sense can you find the kingdom in anything like what's being described in the parable? Then there's a parable of a grain of wheat. And so Apocryphon of James, chapter 8, verses 16 and 17 reads, "Become zealous about the word, for the word's first condition is faith, the second is love, and the third is works. Now from these come life, for the word is like a grain of wheat. When someone sowed it, he believed in it, and when it sprouted, he loved it, because he looked forward to many grains in the place of one. And when he worked it, he was saved, because he prepared it for food again. He prepared it for food. Again, he left some grains to sow. Thus it is also possible for you all to receive the kingdom of heaven. Unless you receive it through knowledge, you will not be able to find it." Well, that parable has a little bit more already provided in terms of its explanation. So in this case, we have the word of God is like a grain of wheat. We have this idea of love, loving the thing that is sprouted, and the idea of working towards it. So some things are already now explained in the parable. But again, there's something as well very quite cryptic about it. And then there's the parable of a head of grain, chapter 12, verses 22 to 23. "For the kingdom of heaven is like an ear of grain which sprouted in a field. And when it ripened, it scattered its fruit, and in turn filled the field with ears of grain for another year. You also be zealous to reap for yourselves an ear of life, in order that you may be filled with the kingdom." So kind of, again, a cryptic thing about reaching for something, trying to be zealous here to acquire something, an ear of life. So within this kind of Gnostic texts, these are things understanding that what one already possesses. So those are just some examples then of parables. So parables basically then are obscure discourses that need to be clarified, and the clarification comes about when one is inside the community. Outside of the community, they are cryptic, enigmatic, mysterious, secretive, but inside the community then understands, has awareness, knowledge of what these parables are having to deal with.